A day of destiny? Or disaster? Donald J. Trump, the people's champion, has declared a new national holiday. It's Liberation Day. A day, according to Trump, that will live in history as the day America broke free from globalization and reclaimed its economic might. Amidst the manicured lawns of the White House Rose Garden, Trump announced a sweeping set of tariffs on imported goods. These tariffs were designed to shake the foundations of the global economy, screaming America first. Trump declared that decades of American decline were over, painting a picture of a nation betrayed by foreign rivals. Economists are divided on the potential impacts. Some argue that these tariffs could lead to a resurgence in American manufacturing, creating jobs and boosting the economy. However, critics warn of a trade war, with international partners retaliating with tariffs of their own, potentially leading to higher prices for consumers and strained diplomatic relations. Various stakeholders, from small business owners to farmers and tech industry leaders, are bracing for the ripple effects. Some see opportunity, while others fear the unknown. For the average American family, the true impact of Liberation Day remains to be seen. Will it be a day of economic revival, or a step towards turmoil? As the sun sets on this historic day, the nation holds its breath, waiting to see if Trump's bold move will lead to prosperity or peril. With a flourish of his Sharpie, Trump unleashed a torrent of tariffs on goods from across the globe. China was hit with a 54% tariff, while the European Union, Canada, Mexico, Japan, and Vietnam also found themselves in the crosshairs. Trump claimed these tariffs were about reclaiming America's economic birthright. He railed against globalization, ignoring his own business empire's role in outsourcing jobs. But tariffs are taxes paid by importers, meaning the real burden would fall on American businesses and consumers. Economists were divided on the potential benefits and drawbacks. Some business leaders saw opportunities for domestic growth, hoping to capitalize on reduced competition from foreign imports. Others feared the tariffs would lead to higher costs and job losses. The reactions were mixed, and the future of this new economic era remained uncertain. The immediate impact of Trump's Liberation Day announcement was a collective gasp from the global community, followed by threats of retaliation. Financial markets went into a tailspin, with stocks plunging and investors bracing for a trade war. Economists warned that the tariffs would lead to higher prices for consumers and job losses in industries reliant on imports. Business leaders voiced concerns about the tariffs' potential to disrupt supply chains and harm American competitiveness. The steel and automotive industries were among the hardest hit, with tariffs on imported steel driving up costs for manufacturers. Farmers faced plummeting export opportunities as other countries imposed retaliatory tariffs on American agricultural products. The tech industry also felt the squeeze, with increased costs for components impacting production and innovation. Small businesses, already operating on thin margins, struggled to absorb the higher costs, leading to closures and layoffs. Experts predicted a prolonged economic downturn if the tariffs remained in place, urging for diplomatic solutions to avoid further damage. As the clock struck midnight on Liberation Day, the tariff hammer came down with the subtlety of a wrecking ball. American importers faced a tariff hike that threatened to decimate their profit margins. Goods from China were hit with a 54% tariff, making them much more expensive. The European Union faced a 20% tariff on goods like automobiles, cheese, and wine. Canada, Mexico, Japan, and Vietnam were also hit with tariffs, as Trump sought trade concessions. In response, China retaliated with tariffs of their own, targeting American agriculture and technology sectors. The European Union also expressed their discontent, threatening to impose counter-tariffs on American goods. Canada, Mexico, and Japan joined forces to negotiate better terms, seeking to mitigate the impact on their economies. Economists warned that these tariffs could lead to a prolonged trade war, disrupting global supply chains and increasing costs for consumers. The long-term consequences could include higher prices for everyday goods and a slowdown in economic growth. As the world watched, the tariff hammer's impact reverberated across the globe, sparking debates and protests. Only time would tell if these measures would lead to fairer trade or further turmoil. The world did not take Trump's tariff blitzkrieg lying down. countries announced retaliatory tariffs on key American exports like soybeans, bourbon, and automobiles. China responded with tariffs on $60 billion worth of American goods, targeting industries from agriculture to technology. The European Union, Canada, and Mexico followed suit, imposing tariffs on American products to inflict maximum political pain. The tit-for-tat tariff battle sent shockwaves through global markets, disrupting supply chains and investment plans. European leaders targeted American motorcycles, jeans, and whiskey, while Canada hit back with tariffs on steel, aluminum, and agricultural products. China's measures were particularly severe, affecting American tech companies and farmers, creating a ripple effect in the global supply chain. The escalating trade tensions led to volatility in global stock markets, with investors wary of the long-term impacts on international trade. As tariffs piled up, industries worldwide faced uncertainty, leading to factory shutdowns, job losses, and economic slowdowns in several countries. As the trade war escalated, it became clear that Trump's promise of victory was wishful thinking. The tariffs drove up costs for businesses and consumers, jeopardizing economic growth. American manufacturers struggled to compete with foreign rivals offering lower prices. Farmers saw their export markets evaporate due to retaliatory tariffs. Consumers faced higher prices for everything from washing machines to food. Small business owners found it increasingly difficult to stay afloat amidst rising costs and dwindling supplies. Workers faced job insecurity and stagnant wages, leading to increased social unrest and protests. Economists warned that the long-term economic impact could be severe, with potential for a recession. Families across America had to tighten their budgets, affecting their quality of life and future plans. The political landscape became more polarized, with lawmakers deeply divided over the trade policies. Internationally, diplomatic relations were strained, complicating global trade negotiations and alliances. Trump's grand plan was to revitalize American industry and reduce the trade deficit. He believed tariffs would force other countries to lower their trade barriers and buy more American products. Spoiler alert, it didn't work. The trade deficit ballooned as tariffs made it more expensive for American businesses to import goods. Economics, you sly dog, you. One notable example was the failed negotiation with China. The tariffs led to a trade war, hurting American farmers and manufacturers. Soybean exports plummeted, and many small businesses faced closure. The economic fallout was severe, with increased costs and lost jobs. The art of the deal, more like the art of the bad deal. Trump's tariff obsession was driven by economic nostalgia for a bygone era of American manufacturing dominance. He believed turning back the clock on globalization could recreate this lost golden age. But manufacturing has become increasingly automated, requiring fewer workers. Many outsourced jobs were low-skill, low-wage jobs that most Americans wouldn't want. Trump's policies failed to account for these realities, clinging to an unattainable vision of economic dominance. Reflecting on past economic policies, it's clear that nostalgia often overlooks the complexities of modern economies. While the past had its strengths, today's economic landscape requires forward-thinking strategies to ensure sustainable growth and prosperity. Trump waged trade wars not just with rivals like China, but with America's closest allies. He accused them of taking advantage of the U.S. and stealing American jobs. He viewed international trade as a zero-sum game, ignoring the concept of comparative advantage. The result was a global trade free-for-all with countries retaliating against U.S. tariffs. The carefully constructed system of international trade rules was left in tatters. Relations with the European Union soured as tariffs were imposed on steel and aluminum. Canada, a longtime ally, faced tariffs on its exports, leading to a diplomatic rift. Mexico, too, was not spared, straining the North American partnership. These actions led to strained diplomatic relationships and a loss of trust. The diplomatic consequences were severe, with allies questioning the reliability of the U.S. The era of cooperation gave way to uncertainty and conflict, reshaping global alliances. Trump's tariff policies evoked memories of the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930. This legislation, signed into law by President Herbert Hoover, aimed to protect American businesses by raising tariffs on over 20,000 imported goods. However, it sparked a global trade war that deepened the Great Depression, as other countries retaliated with their own tariffs. Economists have long debated its impact, but it had a devastating effect on the global economy, leading to widespread unemployment and economic hardship. Trump seemed oblivious to the lessons of history, brushing aside comparisons to Smoot-Hawley. The Smoot-Hawley Act taught us that protectionist policies can backfire, leading to economic isolation and global instability. Ignoring these lessons, Trump's tariffs risked repeating the same mistakes, potentially leading to economic turmoil and strained international relations. While Trump boasted about winning trade wars, ordinary Americans paid the price. Higher import costs trickled down to consumers, driving up prices for everyday goods. Families struggled to make ends meet, caught in a financial vice. The tariffs unleashed a cost of living crisis hitting the working class hardest. So much for making America great again. Small businesses faced higher costs for imported goods, while farmers struggled with retaliatory tariffs on their exports. Politically, the nation became more divided as debates over the economic impacts intensified. Socially, communities rallied to support those in need, but the strain was evident everywhere. The economic, social, and political costs of liberation were profound, leaving a lasting impact on the nation. Wall Street was thrown into a tizzy by Trump's erratic tariff threats. Markets thrive on stability, but Trump's pronouncements created uncertainty. Stock prices plunged, retirement accounts dwindled, and economic recovery teetered. Business investment slowed as companies adopted a wait-and-see approach. The result was a slowdown in economic growth, fueling market anxieties. Specific examples include major companies like Apple and Boeing expressing concerns over increased costs and supply chain disruptions. Investor sentiment turned cautious, with many opting to pull back from the market, leading to further volatility. The trade war's ripple effects were felt across the globe, impacting international markets and investor confidence worldwide. Trump's trade war created the perfect breeding ground for stagflation. Rising consumer prices signaled inflation, driven by higher costs for businesses. Economic growth sputtered as businesses grappled with higher costs and decreased investment. The job market weakened as companies laid off workers. It was a vicious cycle of uncertainty and fear, with Trump at the helm. The trade war disrupted global supply chains, leading to shortages and higher production costs. Economists warned that the combination of rising prices and stagnant growth could lead to long-term economic stagnation. The impact on everyday Americans was profound, with many struggling to make ends meet. Policymakers scrambled to find solutions, but the path to recovery remained uncertain. Despite the turmoil, there were glimmers of hope as communities came together and new businesses emerged. The perfect storm in the economy was a test of resilience, with the potential for a brighter future if lessons were learned. Section 4. Republican rumble cracks appear in the tariff wall. Even within the Republican Party, that bastion of free market ideology and unwavering support for all things Trump, cracks began to appear in the once solid wall of support for the president's tariff policies. Senators and representatives from farm states, facing the wrath of retaliatory tariffs, began to voice their concerns, worried about the impact on their constituents' livelihoods. Senator Chuck Grassley of Iowa, a Republican stalwart and longtime advocate for farmers, publicly expressed his worries about the impact of tariffs on agricultural exports, particularly soybeans, a major crop in his home state. Even Senator Lindsey Graham, typically a staunch Trump ally, couldn't ignore the economic pain being inflicted on his home state of South Carolina and called for a more measured approach to trade. The growing unease among Republicans over Trump's trade war was a sign that the president's go-it-alone approach to trade was backfiring. Even those who had previously been willing to give him the benefit of the doubt were starting to question the wisdom of his tariff policies, recognizing that the economic pain being inflicted on American businesses and consumers was too high a price to pay for a trade war with no clear end in sight. Analysts warned that the long-term effects of these tariffs could be devastating, potentially leading to a prolonged economic downturn and a loss of global market share for American businesses. The cracks in the tariff wall were not just political, but economic, threatening the very foundation of the nation's prosperity. Economists Cry Foul. Imagine a group of highly trained doctors diagnosing a patient. They've reviewed the symptoms and reached a unanimous diagnosis. The patient, the US economy, is urged to hit themselves with a hammer. Trump's tariffs were that hammer. Economists warned Trump, but he ignored them. He called them elitists and claimed he knew better. Many economists argued that tariffs would hurt American consumers by raising prices on imported goods. They believed that the increased costs would be passed down to consumers, leading to higher prices for everyday items. Others pointed out that tariffs could lead to retaliatory measures from other countries, sparking a trade war. This, they argued, would harm American exporters and disrupt global supply chains. Despite these warnings, Trump remained steadfast, believing that tariffs would protect American jobs and industries. The debate continues, with economists divided on the long-term impacts of Trump's tariff policies. Section 2. Business Blues CEOs sing the tariff woes. While economists were busy sounding the alarm bells about the macroeconomic dangers of Trump's trade war, the business community was on the front lines, experiencing the pain firsthand. CEOs of major corporations, small business owners, farmers, manufacturers, they all felt the sting of Trump's tariffs, and they weren't shy about voicing their concerns. The tariffs, initially touted by Trump as a boon for American businesses, quickly turned into a nightmare. The higher costs of imported materials, the disruption of supply chains, the uncertainty created by the trade war, it all added up to a toxic brew that threatened to choke the very businesses Trump claimed to be helping. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce, typically a reliable cheerleader for Republican economic policies, broke with the party line to condemn Trump's tariffs, warning that they would lead to job losses, higher prices for consumers, and a decline in economic growth. The National Association of Manufacturers, another business group with a history of supporting Republican presidents, echoed these concerns, calling the tariffs a tax on American manufacturing. Mary Barra, CEO of General Motors, highlighted the increased costs of steel and aluminum, which forced the company to reconsider its production plans and even led to layoffs in some plants. Small business owners like John Smith, who runs a hardware store in Ohio, found themselves unable to compete with larger retailers due to the sudden spike in prices for imported goods. Farmers too were hit hard. Soybean farmer Jane Doe from Iowa saw her export markets dry up almost overnight, leading to unsold crops and financial strain. The Business Roundtable, an association of CEOs from America's leading companies, issued a statement warning that the tariffs were creating an unpredictable business environment, making it difficult for companies to plan for the future. The impact was clear. Factories closed, workers were laid off, and the very fabric of American manufacturing was under threat. Section 3. From Rose Garden to Rumble Seat, a nation divided. As the trade war raged on, America found itself increasingly divided along regional and economic fault lines. Trump's tariffs alienated many who bore the brunt of the economic fallout. Farmers, once reliable Republican voters, were caught in the crossfire. China retaliated, shutting off a major source of income for American farmers. The promised resurgence of American manufacturing failed to materialize. Many companies were hurt by higher costs of materials and tariffs. The result was a patchwork of economic winners and losers. The trade war sowed division and discontent, pitting Americans against each other. Families found themselves divided, with heated debates becoming a common occurrence at dinner tables and social gatherings. College campuses became battlegrounds for ideological clashes, reflecting the broader national divide. The media amplified these divisions, with news outlets and social media platforms becoming echo chambers for partisan views. Politically, the nation was more polarized than ever, with Congress gridlocked and elections becoming increasingly contentious. Yet, amidst the turmoil, there were glimmers of hope as communities sought to bridge the divide through dialogue and cooperation. Section 1. Retaliation Nation, the world bites back. Trump believed the world would accept his tariffs without a fight. He envisioned countries caving to his demands. But the world had other plans. Countries responded with a resounding, "Oh hell no." They had their own economies to protect. The EU slapped tariffs on iconic American products. Canada targeted American exports. Mexico went after American agricultural products. China, a major player in global trade, imposed tariffs on American goods affecting industries from agriculture to technology. India too joined the fray, targeting American almonds and apples. The global retaliation highlighted the interconnectedness of international trade and the complexities of economic diplomacy. Section 2. The long game tariffs as a bargaining chip. Some argued that Trump's tariffs weren't really about starting a trade war but rather about using them as leverage to extract concessions from other countries. They pointed to his negotiations with Mexico and Canada, which eventually led to a revised trade agreement, the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA, as evidence that his hardball tactics could yield results. The USMCA, while touted by the Trump administration as a major victory, was essentially a modest update to the existing North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA. It contained some provisions that were marginally better for American workers and businesses, but it was hardly the transformative deal that Trump had promised. Moreover, the USMCA did little to address the fundamental imbalances in the US-China trade relationship, which was the primary target of Trump's tariff offensive. China, with its vast manufacturing capacity and state-controlled economy, proved to be a far more formidable opponent than Mexico or Canada. The trade war with China dragged on for months, with no clear winner in sight, and the economic damage on both sides continued to mount. One specific example of using tariffs as a bargaining chip was the renegotiation of the South Korea-US Free Trade Agreement, KORUS. Trump threatened tariffs on South Korean steel, which led to South Korea agreeing to limit its steel exports to the US and open its markets to more American cars. This strategic use of tariffs demonstrated how they could be employed to achieve specific trade objectives, though it also risked straining diplomatic relations. Similarly, Trump's threat of tariffs on European cars was aimed at pressuring the European Union to reduce its trade barriers. While this tactic did lead to some concessions, it also sparked fears of a broader trade conflict. The strategic implications of using tariffs as a bargaining chip are complex. On one hand, they can force trading partners to the negotiating table. On the other hand, they can lead to retaliatory measures and long-term economic uncertainty. Ultimately, while tariffs can be a powerful tool in trade negotiations, their effectiveness depends on the broader geopolitical context and the willingness of other nations to engage in reciprocal actions. Years after Trump's Liberation Day declaration, the legacy of his tariff policies remains debated. Supporters argue tariffs protected American jobs and forced China to play fair. Critics say tariffs led to higher prices, job losses, and strained alliances. The debate continues on whether the tariffs were worth the cost. The term Pyrrhic Victory originates from King Pyrrhus of Epirus, whose army suffered irreplaceable casualties in defeating the Romans at Asculum. Similarly, while some short-term gains were achieved through tariffs, the long-term consequences have been significant. Higher consumer prices and disrupted supply chains have left lasting impacts on American households and businesses. Strained international relations have also made future trade negotiations more complex. Economists continue to analyze whether the short-term benefits outweighed the long-term costs. The true cost of this victory remains a topic of intense debate. Trump's trade war, much like the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of the 1930s, serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of protectionism. It showed that while tariffs might seem like an appealing solution to complex economic problems, they often create more problems than they solve. They can lead to higher prices for consumers, job losses, retaliation from trading partners, and a decline in economic growth. The legacy of Trump's Liberation Day is a mixed bag, a cautionary tale of unintended consequences and the limits of economic nationalism. It showed that while the desire to protect American jobs and industries is understandable, resorting to protectionist measures like tariffs can be a dangerous and ultimately self-defeating strategy. As the world moves forward, it's crucial to learn from the mistakes of the past and to resist the allure of simplistic solutions to complex problems. The global economy is interconnected and interdependent, and attempts to unwind this interconnectedness through protectionist policies are likely to do more harm than good. The real path to economic prosperity lies in cooperation, not conflict, in embracing the benefits of free and fair trade, and in working together to address the challenges of globalization in a way that benefits all countries and all people. Some argue that tariffs can be a useful tool to protect nascent industries and to counteract unfair trade practices. However, the broader consensus among economists is that the long-term costs often outweigh the short-term benefits. The key lesson is that while protectionism might offer temporary relief, it is not a sustainable strategy for economic growth. Instead, fostering innovation, investing in education, and enhancing competitiveness are more effective ways to ensure long-term prosperity. By learning from the past and embracing a forward-thinking approach, we can build a more resilient and inclusive global economy. As the dust settled on Trump's Liberation Day, America was left to survey the battlefield of his trade war. The initial euphoria had given way to a sobering reality check. The trade deficit had actually grown larger. Manufacturing jobs followed the trend of automation and outsourcing. The American consumer found itself under the weight of higher prices. Everything seemed to cost a little bit more. The hidden tax of tariffs crept into shopping carts and online baskets, leaving Americans wondering if Liberation Day was worth the price. As the nation grapples with these challenges, the future remains uncertain. Will the economy rebound? Or are we facing a prolonged period of adjustment? Only time will tell. The legacy of Trump's trade war will continue to be debated for years to come. Did his aggressive tactics force China and other countries to make concessions they otherwise wouldn't have? Or did his actions simply inflict unnecessary economic pain and damage America's standing in the world? As we navigate the post-tariff world, it's crucial to learn from the mistakes of the past. The road ahead requires a more nuanced approach to trade, one that recognizes the interconnectedness of the global economy and the importance of strong trading relationships. The future of global trade lies not in building walls, but in building bridges. For instance, embracing technological advancements can open new avenues for trade and economic growth. Investing in renewable energy and green technology can also create new markets and foster international cooperation. Additionally, focusing on education and workforce development will ensure that nations can adapt to the evolving global economy. By fostering collaboration and understanding, we can build a more resilient and prosperous global trade system for the future.